During my university years, I worked at an underground parking garage in a business center downtown. My shift started at 6 and ended at 2. I took cars from people returning late, gave out keys, kept order, tried not to get in anyone's way. Most clients were polite and just wanted to get their car and leave. That Tuesday around 10, a guy came down who broke the pattern. Mid-30s, expensive suit, drunk in the way people get when they think the rules are beneath them. He slapped his ticket on the counter and told me to bring up his black sedan from the lower level. I checked his tag, grabbed the keys, and when I came back I told him his car was blocked by another vehicle I needed to move first. He exploded, called me incompetent, said he was already late, said I'd cost him something big and he'd file a complaint. I kept my voice even and told him it would be quick. He leaned over the counter like he wanted to scare me and said, "You people don't understand who I am." I said the same thing I always say, "We follow the same rules for everyone, I'll handle it." He demanded I let him walk down and sort it himself. I said no for safety and liability. He laughed in my face, paced, came back, and jabbed a finger close to my chest without touching me. It looked like a show, but the anger felt real. I repeated, 5 minutes. I turned to the keyboard for the blocking car's spare and he kept at it. Idiot. Loser. Small job, big attitude. When I asked him to wait in the chairs by the vending machine, he grabbed my jacket sleeve and gave me a shove. Not hard, but clear. I stepped back and said if he didn't calm down, I'd call building security. He stared for a second, jaw tight, then said, "You'll regret this," and walked out, slamming the door so hard the hours sign rattled against the glass. I moved the cars anyway. Took maybe 8 minutes because the blocking car was at an angle, and I didn't want to scrape the wall. I parked his sedan at the exit, engine on, then killed it and put the keys on the counter under his ticket number. He didn't come back. People drifted in and out, the regular end-of-day trickle. I checked plates, swapped keys, made change for a guy with a crumpled bill. I decided the suit either called a cab or found a couch upstairs to cool off. I crossed him off the mental list of problems and went back to the routine. Around midnight, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was the guard on the ground floor, Pavel. "You at post?" he texted. I answered yes. "Heads up," he wrote. "Agitated visitor coming down." Being aggressive, I looked at the elevator indicator stuttering its way to B2 and felt the skin on my arms go tight. The garage had that late-night hum it always has, but my hands still did the steps I'd practiced. Cracked the side gate in case I needed to step out. Tapped the intercom alert so security would keep listening. Run through the phrases that usually help. I didn't intend to be a hero. I wanted a quiet night and the early bus home. If someone showed up hot, I'd keep space and keep talking. I stepped out of the booth into the main area as the elevator doors opened. It was the same man. Same suit, tie loose, eyes wet. Drunker. He had a sway in his walk like his feet couldn't find the floor. In his right hand he held something metallic. I didn't clock it at first. Phone, maybe a tool. The lighting down there flattens everything. Then he raised it and the silhouette clicked. A gun. Barrel toward me. "Because of you," he shouted. "I missed my meeting. You ruined my life. You think you can block my car and make me beg?" His words slid together, but the meaning was sharp. He kept going about how I'd made him lose money, how I was nothing, standing between him and what he deserved. I raised my hands slow, palms out, and told him his car was ready, and had been ready, that we could get him on the road right now. I pointed with my chin toward the sedan at the exit and said the keys were on the counter. "I'll bring them to you if you want," I said, careful not to move. "Don't move," he snapped, waving the gun. He stepped closer. The distance between us felt small in a way that didn't leave me options. I said the guard upstairs knew he was coming down, and help was already on the way, and nobody wanted trouble. He shook his head like a kid refusing medicine. "You cost me everything," he said. "You don't get to talk." He kept coming. I kept my voice level and told him if he took the car now, no one would stop him at the gate. I could raise it with a button and he'd be out in seconds, and there was no reason for this to be more than a bad night. He asked if I thought he was scared. I said no. I said I was trying to help him leave. He told me to shut up again and called me a liar. The gun didn't shake much for a drunk hand, which scared me more than the yelling. I told him I wouldn't reach for anything and that my phone was on the desk. He took another slow step, still aiming. He kept approaching, holding the gun aimed at me. I kept my hands up and back toward the service corridor where the alarm button was. He tracked me with the gun like he knew what I was thinking, but he also kept talking, which helped. I said I was going to open the gate remotely and he could drive out. He told me to stand still. Then I heard an engine at the ramp. Another client was pulling in. The headlights swept across the pillars and he glanced that way, just a second, but it was enough. I turned, sprinted the last steps, and slammed my palm on the red button. The siren hit immediately, that high, steady wail, and the emergency lights started flashing. He fired. The shot cracked, the sound jumped around the concrete, and a chunk of the wall next to my shoulder spit dust into my face. I ducked and ran down the corridor, blinking grit, moving fast because even drunks can be quick when they're angry. I heard his shoes scraping and his voice behind me, cursing, saying to stop, saying I was dead. The corridor bent left and I took it, hit the crash bar at the end, and stumbled into the service area behind the garages. Security was already there because the alarm pings their radios. One guard grabbed me by the arm and pulled me behind a pillar, asking where the shooter was. I pointed back and said he had a handgun, and he was by the main floor. Another guard, older, keyed his radio and told the lobby to lock the front turnstiles. The siren kept going, which I wanted, because noise makes people hesitate. We heard another shot, and the metal door near us shivered but didn't open. The older guard told me to stay low and asked if there was anyone else down there. I said a client had just driven in. He swore and told his partner to get eyes on the lane cameras. They moved in a practiced way I hadn't seen before when everything was normal. Slow steps, angles, calling out clear. I followed behind them because the back exit led to my booth's side corridor, and the camera feed was there. My hands were shaking hard enough that I needed 2 tries to punch in the code. Inside, the monitors showed the man weaving toward his car, the black sedan by the gate. He was trying doors, looking for the keys, getting more frantic. The car that came in had stopped halfway down the ramp. The driver, a woman in a blazer, stayed inside with her phone to her ear. She'd done the smart thing and reversed back up a little, out of direct line. On the feed, we saw the man pull at the sedan's handle and then look up at the booth like he was about to come for me again. The guards didn't wait. They stepped out with measured voices, told him to drop the weapon, told him police were en route, told him the cameras covered every angle and the elevator was disabled. He shouted he just wanted his car, that he needed to leave. He started toward the sedan again. One guard moved right to draw his focus, while the other kept cover behind a column. The man realized the key wasn't in it, and swore and swung the gun toward the booth window. The older guard barked at him to put it down. For a second he looked like he might fire again, but the siren and the flashing lights and the fact his escape route was a steel gate that I controlled seemed to cut through. He backed toward the driver door, still yelling. They detained him at his car. He tried to start it anyway, jamming his hand under the wheel like he could hotwire it. But without a key, there was nothing to do. The older guard stepped in when the muzzle dipped, and another guard took his wrist. It wasn't clean, but it was quick. The gun clattered under the car and someone kicked it out of reach. Police rolled in minutes later with lights still bouncing off every surface. They cuffed him, checked the serial on the weapon, and told us it was unregistered. Later, I heard he had prior reports for public intoxication and a couple of fights that never made it to court. That night, they booked him for attempted murder, criminal threats, and illegal possession. I gave my statement at 3 in the morning and gave it again a month later at a hearing. In court, I sat 10 feet from him and told the judge what he'd said and how he'd pointed the gun. He stared at the table. He got 3 years. I worked another month after that, long enough to hand over my spot to a friend who needed the paycheck. Every time the elevator opened, I remembered the crack of that shot and saw chips of concrete falling in my head. The detective who handled it told me later the guy's business was already collapsing, and he was hunting for someone small and convenient to blame. I installed the security camera in my hallway just 3 days before it happened. The camera was pointed at my front door, but it also captured the entrance to my workroom down the hall. I'd been noticing small things out of place for weeks, stuff I couldn't explain away as my own forgetfulness. A coffee mug moved from the kitchen counter to the bathroom sink. My laptop charger unplugged and coiled neatly on the floor. The bedroom closet door standing open when I was certain I'd closed it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that living alone was making me jumpy. I travel for work, and sometimes I come home foggy. I figured it was that. But the camera made me feel better, like I'd have proof that nothing weird was actually happening. Thursday afternoon, I came back from a business trip earlier than planned, around 6. The apartment felt normal, quiet, exactly how I'd left it. I didn't even put down my bags. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and pulled out my phone to check the camera feed, just to see if I'd caught anything while I was gone. I remember thinking that if the timeline looked clean, I would finally stop obsessing. I wanted a boring answer. I really did. The last 20 minutes of footage showed nothing, just an empty hallway and the closed door to my workroom. I scrolled back an hour, and that's when I saw it. The door to my workroom slowly opened on its own, maybe 6 inches, then stopped. I knew I'd closed that door before leaving. I specifically remembered checking it because I keep client equipment in there. The door stayed half open for about 30 seconds on the video, then it closed again, smooth and quiet, like someone pulled it from inside. Nobody walked out into the hallway. Nobody appeared on camera at all. I rewound and watched it again, then again. On the 4th watch, I pinched to zoom the frame around the bottom, looking for a draft or a string or anything that would make me feel stupid in a normal way. Nothing. My hands started shaking as I realized what this meant, not in a dramatic movie way, just a cold calculation. The only explanation that fit the video and the timing was that someone had opened the door from the inside and closed it from the inside. I checked the front door event log. No motion, no entry alerts the entire afternoon. My building has decent locks, and there were no signs of a break. Still, the timeline wouldn't change just because I wanted it to. Someone could still be in that room right now, hiding, waiting for me to go to sleep or leave again. I told myself to pause, to think. I set the phone down on the entry table and listened. The apartment sounded like it always does. Distant traffic, the refrigerator cycle. It didn't help. I left my bags by the door and walked through the living room toward the hallway, trying to keep my steps quiet. There's a point halfway down where the light from the living room dies out, and you get that dim tunnel effect. I noticed my breathing pick up. The door to my workroom was closed, exactly like it should be, but now I knew better. I put my hand on the knob to feel for vibration, then thought better of touching anything and pulled it back. I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. At first there was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I held my breath, counted to 6, focused on the gap under the door. Then I heard it, soft and rhythmic. someone breathing on the other side of the door. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the building settling or air conditioning. It was a person. My mouth went dry. I stepped back, slow, heel to toe, keeping my eyes on the door like it could lunge at me. I considered calling 911 right then. I also considered that if I spoke out loud, whoever was in there would know I knew. I didn't want to trigger anything I couldn't control. I backed away to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife from the drawer. It's one of those chef knives you buy on sale and then never really use right. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it, so I put my other hand around my wrist to steady it. I told myself I was not going to try to be a hero. I was going to verify, retreat, call the police, and stand outside with neighbors until help showed. I pulled my phone from my pocket with my left hand and unlocked it without looking down. That's when I heard the floorboard creak inside the workroom, that specific board near the window that always made noise. I made a split-second decision and threw the door open, hitting the light switch at the same time. The light came on, and I scanned every corner fast. My desk, the bookshelves, the stacked boxes along the wall, everything looked normal. Then I saw the folding table by the window had been moved, pulled from the wall just enough to make a gap. There was space under it, enough room for someone to crouch. I took one step and saw the edge of a dark jacket behind the table leg. I didn't wait. I spun, slammed the door, pressed my back to it. Inside came quick footsteps and hard scraping, like a chair shoved back. I didn't try to hold the door. I ran. I grabbed my phone and keys from the entry table and sprinted to my neighbor Rose's door. I banged and yelled, "Call 911, someone's in my place." She opened fast, and I pushed inside. She threw on the chain, and we both stared through her peephole at my door down the hall. Nobody came out. I kept waiting for the knob to turn. It didn't. I told her. They were in my workroom. I saw a jacket. She said, "Stay here," and kept her hand on the chain. We listened for footsteps or a window. All I heard was my pulse. The police got there about 8 minutes later. They cleared Rose's apartment first and kept us in her kitchen while they approached mine. One asked, "Any weapons inside?" I said, "Just kitchen knives and tools." They stacked at my doorway and shouted, "Police!" down the hall. Hearing them move through my place felt wrong, and also like oxygen. I heard, "Kitchen clear," then bedroom clear, then a thump from the workroom and a rattle that sounded like the window. An officer said, "It's open." He leaned out and called something to the others on the stairs. I realized whoever was inside had a head start. They searched my place top to bottom. Closet shelves, under the bed, inside the boxes by my desk. Nobody was there. The workroom window was all the way up to the fire escape. Fresh scuff marks ran along the sill, and a black streak on the floor showed where a shoe slid. The folding table had a new gouge in the drywall beside it. An officer asked if I touched anything after I saw the video. I said no. I closed the door and went straight to Rose's. He nodded and said, "They left fast." I opened my camera app and rewound. The hallway feed showed me go in, then sprint out. No one ever crossed after. The officer taking my statement asked about spare keys, maintenance, X's, deliveries. I told him I changed the locks when I moved in. I had no spare out, and my landlord only enters with notice. He suggested I stay elsewhere. I said I wasn't staying another night at all. They waited while I packed a suitcase. I took the SD card from the camera. I stayed with a friend, and 2 weeks later I broke my lease. The landlord waived the penalty after seeing the report. I keep replaying the choices I made and the ones I didn't. If I'd held the door, maybe I'd have trapped them. But that isn't my job. If I hadn't installed the camera, I might have put my face into that gap. The signs were small and I kept rationalizing them. I still don't know why they picked me. Only that leaving kept me alive then. In July 2012, me and my younger brother Ethan were driving from Phoenix to Vegas. I'd just gotten my license. I was 19 and he was 16, and I was trying to be the reliable older brother for once. We decided to skip the fast highway and take the old roads because I said it would be real America, which now sounds like something I read on a poster. It was Saturday, around 2 p.m., heat blasting off the asphalt. The highway was narrow and straight for miles, with nothing but low brown rock and scrub on both sides. No cars for long stretches. I liked the quiet at first. The AC rattled, and Ethan had his feet on the dash, scrolling through songs, making jokes about the sun trying to cook us in the car like foil-wrapped leftovers. An hour after turning off the main highway, we came up behind a blue sedan going way under the limit. It floated at 40, dead center in its lane, and I got impatient. I checked the empty oncoming lane, signaled, and pulled out. When we were door to door, the sedan jumped like it found another gear and matched our speed. It stayed exactly parallel. I glanced over. 2 middle-aged guys, both with wraparound sunglasses. The driver kept talking into a phone like we hadn't even appeared. The passenger turned his head and looked at us. No expression, just measuring. We hung there, windows almost aligned, and the whole thing felt stupidly personal in a way that made my mouth go dry. I didn't try to be a hero. I eased off to tuck back behind, thinking maybe I'd misread it. The sedan braked hard at the same time and slipped behind us, staying locked at a steady distance. Ethan shifted, dropped his shoes back to the floor, and watched the mirror. "They're staying about 50 meters back," he said. He always estimates in meters because of video games. I didn't correct him. I said, "Probably nothing," and checked my phone. No bars. I told Ethan to try the tablet. He opened the map app, shook his head. No service. Next town is like 30 miles. I nudged our speed up to 70. The sedan did too. Not closer, not farther. Just there. We drove 10 minutes like that. No other cars. Sun bleaching the road so bright it made my eyes hurt. I kept thinking about how stupid it would be to stop out here if the car overheated. Then finally, motion. A black SUV coming toward us in the opposite lane. Big grille, tinted windows. When it passed, my mirror caught it swinging a U-turn in a slow, deliberate arc, then building speed. It fell in behind the blue sedan like they were slotted pieces. My stomach gave that weird, empty drop you get on a roller coaster. I said, "Okay," mostly to myself, and pushed to 85. The SUV and the sedan stayed glued in the same order, same spacing. Ethan leaned forward, watching both mirrors, talking in a low voice like we were in a library. "They're not backing off." He wasn't panicking, but he wasn't doing jokes anymore. I told him to check if the tablet would cache directions, anything that showed a town, a gas station, a word on a sign. He fussed with it, then just held it like he didn't want to say it was useless again. The blue sedan drifted out into the left lane and crept up like it wanted to put its nose ahead of ours. I didn't wait. I floored it. The speedometer climbed. 90. 92. The car hummed and the front end went light, and I realized how dumb a 19-year-old's car feels at that speed. The sedan matched. It reached our rear door and hung there. The driver's glasses turned toward me for a beat, then back to the road. He said something into his phone. The SUV stayed in our lane, a steady shape in the mirror, not pushing, just there. It felt coordinated, which was the worst part. Nobody was waving, nobody was yelling. It was more like we were a box they were trying to close. Ethan said, "What do they want?" I said, "I don't know, but it's not good," and kept my hands locked at 10 and 2 until my fingers started to ache. That ache helped. Honestly. It was a pain I could understand. The sedan nosed another half-foot forward. I could see a smear of something on their rear passenger door, like old tape residue. It was such a normal detail in such a not normal moment that it made me want to laugh. Then, up ahead, a green highway sign. Rest area, 2 miles. Underneath, smaller letters. Ranger Patrol. I said, "There." And Ethan nodded fast, already craning for a turnout. The sedan slid closer, trying to pinch us in the lane. I didn't look at them again. I just kept my foot down and focused on that sign like it was the only solid thing left. We hit 95. The road rose slightly, then bent to the right, and the rest area came into view. A small loop, a couple of covered picnic tables, and a white pickup with a green stripe parked near the entrance with the Forest Service emblem on the door. A guy in a uniform was outside it, scribbling on a clipboard. I flicked the blinker, braked hard but steady, and pulled into the lot. Tires chirped. As soon as our car crossed the line of the entrance, the blue sedan and the black SUV both slammed their brakes, made tight U-turns on the highway, and shot back the way they'd come at full speed. We rolled to the white pickup and I parked a little crooked. The Ranger looked up, pen still in his hand, and I said, "Those 2 cars were chasing us." He scanned the highway, didn't see them, then told us to breathe and start from the beginning. I gave the quick version: blue sedan, black SUV, speed changes, the U-turn, how they tried to box us. Ethan jumped in with the exact moments. He's good with timestamps. The Ranger asked for plates. I hadn't looked, but Ethan said he caught both, and he rattled them off like he was reading a scoreboard. The Ranger wrote everything down, slow and neat. He asked about damage or stickers, anything unique. I told him about the tape residue on the sedan's rear door, and he nodded like that mattered. He radioed it in, said he'd pass it to state police and highway patrol. He told us we did the right thing pulling in and warned us about the old roads, spotty service, slow response. He wasn't lecturing. It sounded practiced, like he'd said it 100 times. We sat in the shade by the bathrooms for 5 minutes because my hands were shaking. Ethan kept repeating the plates under his breath so he wouldn't lose them. The Ranger brought water in a paper cup and asked if he should call anyone. I said no and told him I'd call our mom once we had service. He waited until my hands settled, checked our tires, and waved us toward the on-ramp. We didn't argue about the route. We took the main highway to Vegas, and I drove a little under the limit. Any car sitting next to us longer than a second made my chest tighten. Ethan watched mirrors like it was his job. When the bars came back, I called our mom and said we were fine, leaving out the 95. We rolled into town at dusk, met my uncle for his work thing, and I parked where there were cameras. 2 days later, the Ranger called from a number I didn't recognize. He said they ran the plates. Both were reported stolen from different counties. They found the blue sedan in a motel lot and the SUV near a trailhead, abandoned about a week after. No prints they could use. He said there'd been robberies on remote highways, mostly solo travelers and RVS, easier targets. He'd never seen them go after 2 kids in a regular car. Maybe we looked naive, or maybe they thought we had cash. I asked if they'd caught anyone. He said no. These guys knew what they were doing, and they didn't keep cars long or leave much. He told me again to stick to main roads. I thanked him, and we hung up. I still think about what would have happened if that Ranger hadn't been there. Would they have tried to run us off the road, or waited for a pullout with no cameras? Were they armed? Ethan and I don't really talk about it, but I can tell he thinks about it too. If a car paces us now, he sits forward and watches the mirror like he's ready to call it. I stop taking back roads after that and stick to major highways, even if it adds time. Sometimes I catch myself checking exit signs for words like patrol or station, which is dumb, but I do it anyway. The Ranger said it was probably a small operation, 2 or 3 people working the empty stretches. They knew their lanes. So, when I was still running along the riverfront every morning, this thing happened that made me change my whole routine. I'd been doing that route for 3 years. It helped me clear my head before work at the ad agency. The path was simple. 2 kilometers to the old bridge, then back. Usually there were plenty of people out there. Runners, cyclists, dog walkers. That May morning was sunny, and I left early around 7. About halfway to the bridge, I noticed a cyclist in a bright orange jacket riding ahead in the same direction. But when I reached the bridge and turned around, he turned around too. I figured coincidence. Lots of people do that loop. Then I took a side trail through a small park away from the main riverfront, and he turned there too, even though that trail doesn't lead to the bridge. That's when the off feeling started. Just that click in your head that says, pay attention. I sped up so he could either pass or drop back, but he kept the same distance, about 50 meters. When I got back to the main path, he came back too. I decided to test it. I stopped at the fountain and pretended to tie my shoes. He stopped about 30 meters away, got off his bike, pulled out his phone, staring at nothing. When I started running again, he followed. There was 1.5 kilometers to home, and my pulse wasn't from cardio anymore. I turned off the riverfront into a residential block and ran through the streets between houses, making a few random turns, left, right, left, keeping my pace steady so it didn't look like a sprint. At one corner, I looked back and didn't see him. I let out a breath and kept moving. I took a long way through a different neighborhood and got home. I locked the door, checked the windows, and forced myself to get on with work. The rest of the day was normal, but the orange jacket kept popping into my head. I kept telling myself it was nothing, then replaying him turning where I turned. 4 days later, I went running again, but at a different hour, around 6 after work. Same route though. It was busier than the mornings. About 1 kilometer in, I saw the bright orange jacket again, same cyclist riding parallel to me on the bike path. Maybe it wasn't the same guy. Maybe there are 100 orange jackets. I tried that thought and it didn't fit. I stopped abruptly at a bench like I was stretching, and he stopped too, 1 foot down, phone out. I didn't finish the run. I turned and started walking quickly back toward home. He turned as well and rode in the same direction, not close, not far, just there. I pulled my phone out and pretended to call someone, voice loud enough to carry, "Yeah, I'm heading back now. Meet me at the entrance in 5 minutes." I didn't dial anyone. The cyclist rolled past me and didn't look my way. He went ahead along the riverfront until the orange blended into the crowd. I cut over to the nearest cafe and went inside. I took a table by the window where I could see the river entrance and the sidewalk. I ordered water and watched. People came and went. 2 more cyclists, neither in orange. After 10 minutes, I dropped coins and stepped outside. I looked both ways and started walking. I kept my phone to my ear like the call was still going. I stayed off the river path and used the streets behind it. Every turn, I checked glass for reflections. When a bike clicked its gears behind me, I moved closer to the buildings and let it pass. I didn't run. Running felt like an admission. I kept a steady walk and stuck to people. At the corner by the little grocery, I paused long enough to see down the block. Nothing. I kept going, checked again at the next intersection, and the next, then turned toward my street and looked back one last time before crossing. He was nowhere to be seen. After that, I didn't run on the riverfront for a week. I went to the gym instead. By Saturday, I felt dumb for letting a stranger push me off my routine, so I tried again. Morning, 9, when it's busy. I told myself I'd do half the route and bail if anything felt off. The first stretch looked normal. Dogs pulling owners, a couple taking photos, the older runners talking. I turned early like I planned, still calm. No orange. On the way back, 5 minutes from home, I saw him. Bright jacket by the railing, one hand on the bike, facing my way. I kept running because stopping in the open felt worse. As I got closer, he swung a leg over and pushed off. He didn't pass. He slotted in behind me. I picked up my pace. He matched it. I could hear the soft click of his gears. I stayed on the riverfront until the first street with shops, then cut up the ramp fast enough that my shoes slipped on the metal grating. At street level, there were storefronts and a bus stop with people. I stopped there and turned. He stopped too, about 20 meters back, 1 foot down, both hands on the bars, helmet on. No expression I could read. I stepped backward into the nearest store. It was a small place. I went to the cashier and said, "Can I stand here a minute? I think that guy is following me." The cashier looked past me, then nodded. "Yeah. Stay as long as you need." She asked if I wanted water. I shook my head and stood where I could see the sidewalk. Through the window, I watched him. He didn't come closer. He stayed in the same spot, glancing at traffic, then at the door, like he was waiting. A bus pulled up, people got on and off, and he didn't move. I checked the clock on my phone. 2 minutes. 3. The cashier asked if she should call the police. I said, "I don't know. He hasn't said anything. There's no direct threat." At around 5 minutes, he finally pushed off and rode away. Not fast, just a smooth roll, then a left at the corner, and he was gone. I waited another minute. The cashier asked again if she should call someone. I thanked her and said no. My place was close. I'd walk with people. She offered to have someone from the back walk me. I said, "I'm okay. You've helped a lot." I stepped outside, checked both directions, and joined a small cluster heading the same way. I kept to the shop windows and moved with the crowd until my street, then turned off. 6 weeks have passed since then, and I changed my route. Now I run in a park across town, many people around, and I go with a coworker when our schedules line up. I haven't seen the cyclist in the orange jacket on the riverfront or anywhere else. I still check over my shoulder every time a bright jacket flashes in my peripheral. Maybe he wasn't targeting me. Maybe he just rode the same loop and I noticed. But that side trail I took is barely used, and the way he stopped every time I stopped wasn't normal, really. I'm not interested in testing odds. I'm done running alone in isolated spots. I still wonder who he was and what might have happened if I hadn't paid attention that first morning, and whether he picked someone else the day I cut to the shop street. When I was 32, I'd been writing fan fiction for about 5 years, posting my stories on Archive of Our Own under the username Winterwords. I worked days doing reconciliation and vendor invoices at a small accounting firm, then came home, made dinner, and wrote until my eyes blurred. I had around 800 followers, nice people, chatty, some who stuck around for every update, and one commenter called Storm Chaser started showing up on every single chapter. He wrote long reviews like mini essays, quoting lines back to me, calling me a genius writer. It felt good. I replied with thank yous and smiley faces. After a month, he sent a private message offering to discuss my work in more detail, and left an email address. I told him I preferred to keep things on site. He sent another message the next day, then more. He started sharing ideas for my plot, and tossed in personal questions. What city did I live in? Was I married? Did I outline or just wing it? What hours did I usually write? I skimmed, stopped replying, and changed my settings so only friends could DM me. That should have been that. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, an email hit my work inbox from a Marcus Wade, Storm Chaser's real name, saying he understood my desire to maintain distance, but wanted to support me as a true fan. I actually stared at the address line for a long few seconds because I'd never mentioned my workplace anywhere. I used a pseudonym even on my lockdown Facebook. I deleted the email, blocked the address, and tried to focus on a client's quarterly sales tax. The next morning, he wrote again from a different account, this time using my company's full name. He said he'd accidentally learned where I worked and hoped that didn't scare me. I forwarded both emails to HR, added context, and asked them to put a note with reception. They said they'd tighten visitor screening and told me to ping them if anything else came in. A week later, our receptionist called to say a courier had dropped a small package with my name on it. Looked normal, she said, apologetic. Inside was a leather journal, expensive, with "For a Real Writer" engraved across the cover. There was also a 4-page letter. Marcus wrote that my stories changed his life. He said he knew we were made for each other because we both understood the art of words. I was halfway through when my stomach flipped. He described my car, exact make and color, and my usual route to the office. He mentioned the cafe where I grabbed lunch on Fridays and the fact that I always ordered the same sandwich. Nothing threatening on the page, but no normal person compiles that list unless they're keeping score. I documented everything, put the journal back in the box, and carried it to HR. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry. I remember thinking, just handle the task in front of you. I went to the police that night with printouts of the messages and a copy of the letter. The detective who met me, Martinez, calm voice, no nonsense, read it all and nodded a lot. "We take stalking seriously," he said, "but without direct threats or a physical presence, we can file a report and flag it. If he shows up, call 911. A restraining order's more likely if there's an in-person attempt." I said okay, because there was nothing else to say. On the way home, I deleted my archive of our own account. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. I shut down any social media that wasn't locked tight, scrubbed my usernames, and asked my boss if I could work from home for a while. She agreed. My husband Kevin didn't argue either. He just drove us to the hardware store. We changed the locks. He installed cameras and motion lights. We reviewed alerts like it was a second job. 2 months went by. No emails, no packages, no strange cars parked near the curb. The cameras recorded raccoons and one neighbor's cat. I let myself breathe a little. I went back to the office. I parked closer to the entrance and kept my bag light so I could move fast. I looked up when doors opened and I checked the mirrors when I turned left out of the garage. Then last Tuesday, around noon, my coworker Rob stopped at my desk and asked, kind of tentative, "Hey, was some guy looking for you last week? Tall, maybe 40-ish? Baseball cap?" My mouth went dry. "Why?" "He was in the lobby," Rob said. "Asked what floor you were on. Security wouldn't send him up. He seemed, I don't know, persistent? I didn't think much of it then. But you mentioned that situation, so..." He lifted his hands like, "Don't shoot the messenger. Figured you should know." I called Detective Martinez from a conference room with the door shut. He remembered me immediately. I told him what Rob said. He asked for dates, approximate time, any description. I gave him everything. He said he'd request the building footage and that this was enough to start a restraining order, but we needed to identify Marcus to serve it. "Security video shows a man about 40 in athletic wear," he said later, after he'd pulled the clip. "Face partially hidden by a baseball cap." The next incident happened at the grocery store near my house. I was in the checkout line, double-checking my list, when I felt eyes on me. Not casual glancing, staring. I turned and saw a man matching the description from the footage. Around 40, athletic jacket, baseball cap low. He smiled like we knew each other. His hand lifted, like a wave was coming. I didn't wait. I pulled out my phone and said loud, "I'm calling the police." The cashier looked up. The man pivoted and walked out fast. I kept my eyes on the door until it shut. Outside, I actually dialed 911 and gave a description: cap, jacket, approximate age, height, that smile. Patrol arrived in under 10 minutes, but he was gone. The manager brought us to the office to review cameras. We watched him on grainy angles moving down Serial, then out. Only his back and a partial license plate from the lot. The officers took my statement and logged the footage. In the parking lot, I called Detective Martinez. He said they would start an active investigation, use the emails and the plate, but it could take time. I said I understood and waited. That night, Kevin and I sat at the table with calendars. He said, "Go to your sister's. Take unpaid leave. I'll handle the house." I hated leaving him, but it made sense. I emailed my boss, got approval, and 2 days later I drove to Virginia. I worked remotely, kept my routine simple, and called Martinez every week. Nothing happened. No emails, no packages, no cars idling. After the second month, I slept through the night again. After the third, Martinez said they had a real address for Marcus in a neighboring state and would serve him. The next morning. 2 weeks later, Martinez called again. They had served the restraining order at that address through the local sheriff. He sounded relieved for me. Then he said detectives returned for a follow-up interview and learned from the landlord that Marcus had moved out a month earlier with no forwarding information. The place was empty. No computer, no papers, nothing useful. So the order existed, but he was already gone. Martinez said they would keep the case open, flag his name, and update me if anything hit. He told me to choose my next steps based on comfort, not fear. Alone. I went home. I stopped writing in public. I deleted everything tied to Winterwords and hunted down old mentions until search results were blank. I changed routes, varied times, kept my head up in parking lots. I still did not know how he found my real name or my workplace, and that not knowing sat heavy. I checked mirrors and watched for the same car twice. Martinez kept the file open, but said without contact or a good address there was not much else to do. Kevin upgraded the system again. More cameras, better doorbell, brighter lights, and privacy film. I made new emails with no personal info, turned off location history, and stopped using my name on deliveries. I do not even comment on articles anymore. I think through how a username could trace back to me and then do nothing. The worst part is not just that it happened. It is that I will probably never know how he connected Winterwords to me, so I cannot seal it. I used to love the writing. Now the keyboard feels like a risk I cannot justify. When I consider starting again, I picture that smile, and I close the laptop. I've been teaching elementary school for 12 years now, and I've chaperoned school trips dozens of times. The trip with fourth graders to the educational camp in spring 2018 was the only one after which I seriously thought about leaving the profession. The camp was 2 hours from the city, a set of plain cabins by a lake where kids spent 3 days learning about plants, pond water, and basic team challenges. We had 28 kids and 4 adults. Me, another teacher named Sarah, our school nurse, and a parent volunteer. The first day went smoothly. The kids were wired but listened. After dinner and a short campfire, we split them into cabins. Girls in one, boys in the other. 2 adults per cabin. I was with the girls with Sarah. We did the usual. Lights out, quick checks, whispered reminders to stop giggling. I set my phone alarm for 1:30 and 4 o'clock just to do head counts. Habit. At 1:30, everyone was in place. A couple of girls whispered about who had a crush on who. Small stuff, nothing concerning. I walked the row, counted, and made mental notes. One had a cough, another wanted her nightlight brighter. I remember thinking, this is why we still do these trips. They feel brave for one night, and you teach them that adults are nearby. I lay back down in my sleeping bag on the floor by the door, shoes on, jacket as a pillow. I didn't fall fully asleep, more of that half-awake teacher doze where every rustle pings your brain. At some point, Sarah got up to use the bathroom. When she came back, I heard the door click, then quiet. Nothing felt off. Around 2 a.m., Sarah was at my shoulder whispering, "I just walked through the boys' cabin. One bed's empty." She looked wrong, calm voice, shaking hands. "It's Ethan. Ethan Porter." I was up in a second. We crossed the porch in socks, didn't even feel the cold. In the boys' cabin, his bunk was empty but made, like someone smoothed it down with a flat palm. His jacket and shoes were under the bed. So, barefoot, in pajamas. My stomach flipped. That's not wandering to the bathroom. That's leaving. We woke the nurse and the parent volunteer. Sarah took the dining hall. I checked both bathrooms and the showers, calling Ethan low so we wouldn't wake the boys yet. Nothing. We got the camp director up. He called local police and started organizing staff for a perimeter check. I called Ethan's parents. His dad didn't understand at first, kept asking what I meant. Then he started yelling. He wanted to know why we hadn't noticed immediately, why the doors weren't locked, how far the lake was. His wife was crying somewhere behind him. I said the lake was close, and we were searching right now, that police were on their way. He said he was driving out. I told him to drive safe. We moved quickly. The camp staff gathered all the kids into the main hall with board games and cocoa under the nurse's eye. We woke the boys carefully, no panic, and asked if anyone had seen Ethan get up. A couple said no. One said he heard someone moving very quietly. That was it. Outside, we formed lines and started sweeping the tree line with flashlights. The fog by the lake made the beams short and useless. I kept angling mine at the water's edge, counting each dark lump as a rock, then recounting because I didn't trust my eyes. The cold got into my arms. I tried to keep my voice steady on the radio, giving positions. In my head, I kept repeating, barefoot, pajamas, 8 years old. Police arrived fast and set up a command point at the parking lot. They asked for clothing description, bedtime details, recent stressors. I gave everything I knew. The camp director pulled up old security camera feeds from the dining hall, which didn't help, and from the main gate, which also didn't help. No cameras on the cabin porches. The officers split us into sectors and told us to stop calling his name and listen instead. Kids sometimes answer the wrong thing or go quiet if they're scared. We listened. I heard sticks crack, water lap, radios hiss. No voice. They found Ethan 4 hours later at dawn. A patrol car spotted him sitting at a bus stop off the highway, about 2.5 kilometers from camp. He was on the ground hugging his knees, barefoot, dirty, with scratches up and down his shins but breathing. When they brought him in, I cried in a way I usually don't in front of kids. He looked past me, like he was still following something I couldn't see. The nurse wrapped him in blankets and warmed his hands against hot packs. Mild hypothermia, superficial cuts, pulse, okay. Physical box checked. The psychological box was not. He was quiet, then suddenly insistent, telling the officer in these flat little bursts that he'd heard his mom calling his name outside the cabin and he needed to go to her. He said she sounded like she does when she's mad at him for ignoring her. Sharp, impatient. He said he didn't take his shoes because it was only to the parking lot. When the officer asked how he got to the highway, he said, "I followed her voice. She kept moving." He couldn't describe a person, only that the voice was familiar and close, like behind his shoulder. He seemed confused the whole time we were talking to him, like the facts were slipping. His parents arrived within an hour, and the relief in his mother's face was immediate and then complicated. Hugging him, then looking at the scratches like they were an accusation. They took him straight to the hospital. The camp director shut it down. "Trip's over," he said, and I didn't argue. By lunch, every kid was on a bus home. Back at school, Ethan's parents filed a formal complaint with the district. An investigation opened. Protocols, bed checks, ratios, door locks, lights, radios, all of it. We laid out our timeline. 2 adults in each cabin. Counts at set times. No exterior signs of forced entry. We answered what we could, and then there was the empty space where he just decided to leave. Technically, we did everything right. Everyone was asleep, and Ethan left silently. The strangest part started when Ethan gave his explanation of what happened. At first, he wouldn't talk, just stared at the floor with his hands in his sleeves. His parents hired a child psychologist, and on the 3rd session, he finally spoke. He said he woke up at night because he heard a woman's voice calling his name. It sounded like his mom, but off, like through a wall. He thought she'd come to pick him up because something urgent happened. He got up, walked toward the voice, left the cabin. After that, it was blurry. He remembered the path becoming a road and the voice ahead, always a few steps farther, saying his name and telling him to hurry. He didn't remember the cold or his feet. He remembered reaching the highway and sitting at the bus stop because he was tired. Then the voice stopped. He didn't know where he was. Then the police arrived. The psychologist said it could have been sleepwalking with hallucinations from stress. Ethan had been through his parents' divorce, and his mother had moved to another state. He missed her, and his mind supplied the voice. Another possible explanation was a short dissociative episode from psychological trauma. I sat in one session to answer questions about the camp. Ethan stayed close to the psychologist and avoided my eyes. When she asked if the voice sounded angry or friendly, he said, "Impatient." When she asked if he saw anyone, he said no, only heard her behind him sometimes, and then in front. The psychologist told his parents that with routine and time, it might never happen again. His parents didn't accept it. His father wanted someone to blame. He told me, "A voice doesn't open a door." He asked how a sleepwalker avoided the lake and found the road. He asked if someone at camp could have called to Ethan from outside. Police rechecked employees, confirmed schedules and phone activity, and interviewed staff. They also pulled the bus stop camera. It showed Ethan arriving alone from shoulder and sitting down. Medical exams found only exposure and scratches. Toxicology was negative. A neurologist ordered MRI and EEG. Both were normal. The neurologist told the parents child sleepwalking under stress is real and can look deliberate. Pain blunts under adrenaline. The district finished its review too and ruled we hadn't violated protocols. 2 adults per cabin. Documented checks. Radios working. Doors not locked for bathroom access. The story still went public. The district held a meeting with parents. It was tense. A few families withdrew their kids. Sarah quit a month later. She said she couldn't carry that responsibility anymore. I stayed, but I stopped doing overnights. Day trips. Ethan changed schools before the year ended. I didn't see him again. 7 years passed. Sometimes I wake at 2 and listen to the house. I think about how close he came to the edge of worst case. An hour more in that cold. 1 turn left instead of right. I replay the small decisions. The door not locked, our alarms spaced the way they were, our trust in routine. I think about the word Ethan used, impatient, and how believable that is to a child who wants to be good. I don't know what really happened that night. Maybe it was sleepwalking, maybe a trauma loop, maybe just a tired kid following a thought that felt like a command. I do know I was there and couldn't stop it. Sometimes children go places we can't follow even when we're right there, and that's the scariest lesson a teacher can learn. Back in 2018, I was in this amateur rock band with some friends from school, and we practiced in Daniel's garage most Thursday nights. I'm 23 now, but I can still hear how that night ended. Cymbals rattling, someone laughing, Daniel saying he'd text the mix. We were 17 and taking a battle of the bands way too seriously. It was past 11 when we packed up. Everyone else had cars. Daniel offered to drive me, and I said no because his house was the opposite direction. I told him I liked the walk. I lived about 2.5 miles away through quiet subdivisions. I texted my mom, on my way, late, and got doors locked, be quiet, back. Jacket zipped, backpack on, earbuds in. I headed down the four-way where every house looked the same except for the porch chairs. I was thinking about whether we should open with the faster song. About 10 minutes in, I pulled out one earbud because something felt off. Not spooky, just that creep of awareness in the back of your neck. At first, I only heard my own steps. Then there was another set, a little out of sync with mine. I slowed, then turned around. Someone in a dark hoodie was behind me, maybe 50 meters back. Head down, hands in the pocket. No face, just a shape coming my way. I took out the other earbud and sped up. People walk at night. I told myself not to be dramatic. I turned onto a side street I always used because it cut a corner toward my block. The footsteps turned too. They got quicker. My chest tightened. I debated calling Daniel, then pictured fumbling the phone and stopping. I caught a raised slab too late. My shoe hit the crack and I went down on my right knee, palms scraping concrete. It knocked the breath out of me. My phone popped from my pocket and skittered. By the time I scrambled up, the person was closer, maybe 20 meters now. I grabbed my phone and forced myself to keep my head up. I started running for real. I heard his steps change to a run too, louder and faster and right there in the quiet. "Hey, stop!" he yelled, slurred, like he'd been drinking or his mouth didn't work right. I didn't look back. I cut into the narrow alley between two fenced yards that spits you onto the next street. In daylight, it's a shortcut. At night, it felt like a tube. There was a tipped trash bin halfway down. I edged past it sideways, and that's when something hot ripped across my left arm just above the elbow. No warning. My jacket opened and my skin opened under it. I screamed. My brain lagged behind the fact of it. I glanced back and saw him. Middle-aged, dirty hoodie, patchy beard, jeans darker at the cuffs. He had a folding knife out, the blade bright for a second in the alley light. He wasn't sprinting. He was tracking me, breath loud, eyes too wide. He said something, mushed words I didn't understand, and lifted the knife. I didn't stop. I bolted out of the alley and cut right. A porch light glowed 2 houses down. I aimed at the light like it meant people. He yelled again. It stopped being words and turned into a sound. I clamped my right hand over the cut and felt wet heat. Blood ran under my palm. The sleeve stuck. I focused on the next mailbox, then the next. Him behind me and the rhythm of our feet. He was close enough that I could hear the rustle of his hoodie. Close enough that I caught a sour smell when the wind shifted. I didn't waste breath screaming. I kept my body forward and my eyes up. I kept running because facing him meant the knife again, and I knew how that felt now. Adrenaline did its job. The pain went from a knife line to a dull shape that lived on my arm instead of inside it. I kept running and pressed my right hand against the cut. The adrenaline blocked most of the pain. After a few more minutes of running, I came out on a lit street near a 24-hour convenience store. I looked behind me and didn't see anyone. He was gone. That's when the pain really hit and I realized how soaked my shirt was. I ran into the store and asked the cashier to call an ambulance. My voice came out thin and shaky. He blinked once, then grabbed the phone and said, "Sit. Put pressure." He tossed me a white towel and it turned red in a second. He kept asking, "You safe? He come in?" I told him no. I thought I lost him. He called my parents too after I shoved my phone across the counter with my mom's name pulled up. I sat on a crate by the ice freezer and did exactly what he said. It hurt worse as the adrenaline dropped, like the cut finally caught up with me. He brought some tape and wrapped the towel tighter while he stayed on the line. He asked my name twice because I gave it wrong the first time. When he said, "Ambulance is close," I finally took a breath. A woman buying cigarettes stood there watching me and said, "Do you want water?" I shook my head because I didn't know if I was supposed to drink before the EMTs checked me. My parents showed up in 20 minutes, almost the same time as the ambulance. My mom was pale and angry in that way where she wasn't yelling yet, just laser-focused. My dad stood by the door and scanned the parking lot like the guy might pop out from behind a car. The EMTs cut the sleeve and peeled the towel back. One of them said, "You did good. Keep pressure." They wrapped it with real gauze, checked my vitals, and asked me to rate the pain. I said 7 because it felt stupid to say 9. My mom rode with me to the hospital. My dad followed. At the hospital they stitched me up, 12 stitches total, but luckily the knife hadn't hit any major vessels or nerves. The doctor ran through the risks like a script: infection, soreness, limited movement for a few days. I got a tetanus shot. A nurse asked if I'd been drinking. I said no. She nodded, like she had to ask. They cleaned my scraped knee too and stuck me with antibiotics. Someone handed me a consent form and I signed it with my left hand because the right was still sticky with dried blood and I didn't want to smudge the paper. My phone buzzed with texts from Daniel and the others. "You good? Did you get home?" I typed I'm okay, and put it face down because my mom kept looking at me like I might disappear if she blinked. We left before dawn. The cashier had given his name and a statement to the EMTs. My dad drove us home without the radio on. My mom handed me a trash bag and said if I felt sick to use it. I didn't. I felt tired and wired at the same time. I showered with the bandage covered and tried not to cry because it hurt to swallow. I slept for maybe 2 hours. Police came the next day to take my statement. 2 officers, one older and one my sister's age. They sat at our kitchen table with paper cups of coffee and a notepad. I told them everything I could remember. I described the guy as best I could: medium height, dark clothes, hood covering his face, possibly drunk. I repeated the slurred voice and the knife, the alley, the direction he'd been coming from. I didn't pretend I saw more than I did. The older officer asked about tattoos or scars, and I said I didn't see any. He asked if I could pick him out if I saw him again. I said maybe, but I wasn't sure. They photographed my arm and the torn jacket. They asked if they could take the jacket as evidence. I said yes. They patrolled the area for a few weeks but never found anyone. One officer called to follow up and said they'd checked nearby houses for doorbell cameras. There were none pointed at that alley. The convenience store only had one camera at the register, not the door. The alley had nothing. They closed the case eventually for lack of leads. My parents banned me from walking anywhere alone at night, and the band agreed to always make sure everyone got home safe. Daniel apologized for not insisting on driving me, even though it wasn't his fault. For a while, my dad drove me everywhere. Then slowly I got some freedom back. But I kept a ride plan. I'm 23 now, and I still have the scar on my arm. I never listen to music in headphones when I'm walking after dark anymore. Sometime after the stitches, my mom started checking the deadbolt twice without thinking. I still keep my keys between my fingers on certain streets. Sometimes I turn around for no reason just to check that no one's following me. During the summer of 2022, I was working as a surveyor for a development company outside Cleveland. My partner Danny and I had this weird hobby of exploring abandoned buildings during lunch breaks, looking for interesting architectural details or old stuff we could salvage for collections. One Tuesday in July, we were doing measurements for a new residential complex near the industrial zone, when Danny pointed out this old brick warehouse about 2 blocks away. The sign on the front said Miller Storage, but the paint was so faded you could barely read it. The place had been empty for at least 20 years based on the rust and broken windows. We had 45 minutes until we needed to be back, so we decided to check it out. The main entrance was boarded up solid, but there was a side door that gave way after Danny hit it with his shoulder a few times. Inside smelled like mold and standing water, exactly what you'd expect. We stepped in just far enough to make sure the floor wasn't soft. I'm 32 and not built for falling through rotten planks for a TikTok. Danny laughed, said, "Clock's running," and we did a quick sweep with our phone lights. It felt stupid fun in the way dumb hobbies do. I told myself we'd bail if we saw any signs someone was living there. Blankets, food, whatever. I don't mess around with that. The ground floor was completely empty. Just concrete floor and trash in the corners. We climbed a metal staircase to the second level where there were old wooden shelving units and some rusted barrels. Danny was taking pictures with his phone when he noticed a door in the far corner. It was just a regular service door, nothing special about it except for one thing. There was a brand new padlock hanging on it, shiny silver steel. Everything else in that building was covered in years of dust and cobwebs, but this lock looked like it had been put there maybe a month ago. We both stood there staring at it for a minute. Danny tried the handle, but obviously it didn't budge. He said we should leave it alone, but I was curious. I went back down to my truck and grabbed a crowbar from the toolbox. We didn't break the lock itself. We just pried the hinges off the door frame since the wood was old and rotted. It wasn't clean. Each hinge groaned and the screws chewed out of the frame like wet cardboard. Danny kept watch at the top of the stairs and said every 30 seconds, "We have to move, man." It took maybe 2 minutes. Then I lifted the door off like a lid and set it aside. The door opened into a small room, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. I used my phone flashlight to look around. There was a camping cot with a blanket on it, plastic water bottles, military-style MRE packages, and several gas cans lined up against the wall. On the opposite wall, someone had hung a calendar for this year with certain dates circled in red marker. Next to the calendar was a stack of papers. I walked over and picked them up. Driver's licenses, passports, credit cards, all different names, different people. Some from Ohio, some from Michigan, one from Pennsylvania, maybe 15 or 20 IDs total. My stomach dropped. Danny was standing in the doorway taking video on his phone when we both heard it. Metal scraping downstairs. Someone had just opened that same side door we'd come through. We killed our lights at the same time. Danny's breathing went shallow, and I tucked the papers back under the rubber band. I set the door we'd lifted against the jamb so it wouldn't scream open space from the stairs. The padlock still dangled like a joke, and the crowbar felt way too loud in my hand. I slid it into my vest and pointed at the shelves. But Danny shook his head. We listened, trying to count footsteps and pick a plan. No voices yet. Heavy footsteps echoed up through the empty building, slow and deliberate, heading toward the staircase. We looked at each other, and Danny mouthed, "Go." But there was nowhere to go except back through that door we'd just broken open. I set my hand on the torn edge and tried to push it back into the frame, like that would make a difference. The wood scraped and shuddered. The footsteps reached the second floor and started moving between the shelves, slow and steady, like they weren't in any hurry. We held still. I kept one palm on the door to stop it from wobbling and making noise. I could hear my pulse and that high ring in my ears you get when you're trying too hard to be quiet. The steps came closer, maybe 20 feet, then stopped. Silence. Not the clean kind. Waiting silence. Danny's arm brushed mine and I almost jumped. We didn't speak. We didn't even look at each other. I counted to 5, lost it, started again. 10 seconds, maybe less. Then the steps turned and walked back toward the landing. One by one, measured, like whoever it was had done this walk 100 times. We heard the stairs take the weight, then the echo fade as they hit the ground floor. A pause. The side door scraped open and shut. The metal settled. We didn't move. Danny held up his hand with all 5 fingers, then folded one down, then another, counting us through a full minute. Then another. He mouthed, 10 more. I nodded. My legs burned and my hand went numb against the door edge. When we finally edged out, I put the door back where it had been leaning and took the crowbar from my vest so I wouldn't clang it on the railing. We hustled to the stairs, staying low without meaning to, and then we ran. I hit the second step wrong and rolled my ankle, grabbed the rail, and kept going. No words, just getting out. Outside, Danny kept the truck between us and the warehouse while I unlocked it with shaking hands. We didn't talk until we were 2 blocks away. He said, "Don't stop." I said, "I'm not." We drove straight to the nearest police station and asked for a detective. The desk guy looked us over like we were about to waste his time, but he called someone anyway. A detective named Harris came out, mid-40s, no nonsense. We told him what we saw, exactly, no guesses. He asked if we touched anything. I said I put the papers back. He didn't love that, but he wrote it down. He asked why we were in there at all. I told him the truth and waited for the lecture. He just said, "All right," like he'd heard worse. Harris rode with 2 patrol officers to Miller Storage and told us to stay available. He took our numbers and asked for the video on Danny's phone. Danny airdropped it in the parking lot and then deleted it at Harris's request after confirming the transfer took. We sat in the truck for a minute, and neither of us wanted to drive back to the site, so we called our supervisor and said we had to deal with something urgent. Not a lie. Harris called me a week later with an update. He said they searched the building and the room, collected the IDs, passports, cards, the calendar, the food, the gas cans, everything. They lifted prints off the MRE packets and the cot frame. They ran the IDs. Every single one belonged to a real person. None of them had reported anything stolen or missing. No hits on the prints. No cameras in the area that caught anything useful. Without a complainant or a victim, and with the property owner not pressing trespass charges on a vacant building, there was no charge to make. He said, "We closed it. If something else comes up, we'll reopen." He sounded frustrated but careful, like he didn't want to promise anything. 3 months later, the warehouse got torn down when the residential project started. We didn't get that contract. I drove by once and watched the excavator chew through a corner wall and then left before they reached the second floor. Danny quit and moved to Pennsylvania. He said he couldn't shake the feeling from that day and needed a reset. I believed him. Our local paper ran a short piece about the demolition and rumors about what the police found. People talked for a while. Theories started. Identity theft ring, stash spot, safe house. Then the talk dried up. Nothing new ever showed. I still think about those footsteps and how they paused like the person knew exactly where to listen. I think about how close they got and then turned around. Did they hear us hold our breath? Did they know we were there and decide not to open that door because it would be trouble? What would have happened if my ankle had actually snapped and I'd yelped? What was the end game with all those IDs? I won't get answers. I'm not trying to chase them down. But every time I open a door at work now, even a normal one on a clean site, I listen first. I know that room wasn't anything legal. It was October of 2018. I'd just moved into this first-floor apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those 3-story buildings with individual entrances for each unit. The rent was cheap, it had a small private deck, and after years of sharing space with random roommates, having my own place felt like oxygen. I'm a graphic designer and I work remote, so being able to set up a desk by the window and not fight for kitchen counter space felt huge. First month was easy. Soft voices through walls. The neighbor who always waved. Packages sitting where they should. Nothing weird. Late October, I went down to grab my mail and came back up the path to my deck. And there it was on the steps. One muddy boot print with a deep tread pattern. Big. Definitely a man size. We hadn't had rain in almost a week. The dirt in the planters had a crust on top. So whoever left it tracked in mud from somewhere else and walked right up to my door. I told myself not to overreact. People visit the wrong doors. But I took a photo anyway. Then I wiped the step with a paper towel because it made my stomach feel tight to see it. The next day I told myself it was probably the UPS guy or the landscaper. I kept working, answered emails, exported a banner set, tried to forget it. That afternoon, I stepped outside to reset my brain and saw 4 more prints. They started at the stairs, crossed my little deck, and stopped at my living room window. Whoever it was stood there, toes near the siding. I leaned in and felt grit on the sill, footprints in fine dust, toe marks like someone shifting their weight. On the glass, there was a handprint, palm and fingers, smeared like they'd pressed in to steady themselves. It was big. Male, almost certainly. The hair on my arms went up. I don't scare easy in daylight, but this felt personal in a way that's hard to shrug off. I called the property management office. The woman said, "Our cameras cover the main entrance and the lot. Individual decks are technically your private area." I told her about the prints, the handprint, how I hadn't had visitors. She said, "We can send maintenance to check the lights on the building. In the meantime, I recommend installing a camera on your deck and contacting the police if it happens again." I asked if anyone else had complained. "Not that I've seen," she said. It felt like a script. I thanked her and added a camera to my cart, telling myself I'd drive to the store the next day. That night, around 10, I was working late on a client project. I had my laptop on the coffee table in the living room. I was already on edge, so I kept the TV off and just played a podcast low from my phone. Then I heard a noise outside, a soft creak, the kind old wood makes when someone steps on it. My deck has 5 steps up from the path. It always complains when you walk on it, even in socks. I closed my laptop so the screen wouldn't light me up and crawled to the window on my hands and knees. I felt stupid for moving like that, but I didn't want to be a silhouette. I lifted a corner of the blind with 2 fingers. My stomach dropped. A man stood at my door, hoodie up. He had one shoulder angled toward the handle, testing the knob like he was being patient about it. He didn't rattle it hard, Just slow, like he did this often. My door was locked. I always locked it. It didn't matter. He stayed there, focused, like I was a task he planned on finishing. I pulled my phone toward me and muted it. I didn't call 911 yet. If he heard my voice, he might panic and rush it. I needed seconds, not screaming. I slid backward into the hallway and looked for anything heavy I could hold, because that's where my brain went. Slow him down, make a barrier. Don't be an idiot. I picked up the metal broom and wedged a chair under the handle, even though I knew that trick isn't perfect on a swing-in door. It made me feel less useless. I turned off the lamp in the bedroom and stood with my back to the wall, listening. Another step, then a pause. The creak of the top board where it meets the door frame. I went back to the blinds and looked. He was closer to the handle now, shoulder pressed in slightly, watching the lock. He pulled something out of his pocket. Thin metal, maybe 6 inches. He adjusted his grip like he knew exactly what he was doing. I could see his jaw. No facial hair. Youngish. He leaned in and slid the metal to the lock and started working on the lock. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, moving quietly toward my bedroom with a lock. The operator answered and I whispered someone was trying to break into my apartment now. She asked my address, told me to stay on the line. Officers being dispatched immediately. Metal clicks at the door, then a loud bang, then another, then another. The frame rattled, but the deadbolts held, which I felt more than heard. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the floor between bed and wall silently. The operator said units were 2 minutes out and asked me to breathe with her. I pressed the phone to my ear and counted breaths while staring at wood grain. Then everything went quiet outside, which somehow felt worse than those kicks a moment ago. She asked if I could still hear anything, and I said it stopped just now. She told me to wait until officers knocked and identified themselves by name and numbers. I stayed put on the floor, heartbeat loud, listening to the door stays quiet outside. Voices outside, then a firm knock, and someone called out, "Police," clear and steady sounding. I checked the window, saw patrol lights bouncing on cars, and told the operator immediately. She stayed on while I walked out, and 2 officers stood on my deck waiting. The guy was gone. One officer swept his light and said he'd probably run fast. They found a thin metal pick on the boards near the threshold and bagged it. Another officer photographed footprints on the steps and the smeared hand on glass outside tonight. They asked for a description. I said hoodie up, youngish, average build, probably male there. They knocked on neighbors' doors, came back empty, and promised extra patrols through night to night. A detective came the next morning with a folder and a calm, practiced voice anyway. She said similar attempts targeted first-floor entries nearby. Same routine, same timing, same persistence recently. She told me I did the right things and asked about my routine and posts. I said my socials were private and I hadn't shared the address anywhere online publicly. She asked to dust for prints. I signed forms, and their tech worked carefully inside. They lifted partials from the frame and collected the pic, then thanked me for cooperating. She suggested cameras and stronger hardware and said evening patrols would increase for now locally. I stayed another month because moving immediately wasn't realistic, and client deadlines stacked fast then. I added 3 more locks and a door bar, plus a ring camera for coverage. Management replaced the strike plate with longer screws, which looked solid on paper to me. Every outside sound set me off. Trucks, bins, footsteps, anything touching that siding out there. Twice the ring pinged person detected, and the porch was empty by playback each time. One clip showed fabric close, then a shoulder sliding away before motion ended mid-frame. I sent the clip to the detective. She said others saw the same behavior lately. I kept a hallway light on and staged shoes and keys by bed every night. Sleep happened but shallow, like waiting for old wood to creak under weight again nightly. In December, I broke my lease and moved to a third-floor place with security downstairs. I paid the fee, hired movers, and avoided that deck as much as possible afterward. The detective called again. Still no suspect. More reports. Nothing strong enough for charges yet. She told me, "Do what keeps you safe." And I started over with intention anyway. I still think about the footprints on my porch and the door kicking sound nightly. I never learned who he was, or why my place was worth his time then. Maybe it was random. A man testing ground floors and counting on someone forgetting something. Maybe he watched long enough to map routines, then listened between kicks for movement inside. I hate not knowing, and how ordinary life turned into planning exits and hardware lists. I lock every door twice, park near lights, and introduce myself to neighbors early now. Carrying groceries upstairs, I still listen for wood stairs, expecting that slow, patient creak again. Sometimes I catch a hoodie in a crowd, and every muscle goes stiff for minutes. There's no ending here, just habits and vigilance, because that's what finally kept him out. I still wonder if he's out there, moving door to door, waiting on luck somewhere. Last October, I rented a small cottage on the Maine coast for a work trip. My company was doing a 3-day training in a nearby town, and instead of staying in a hotel with all my coworkers, I decided to find something more secluded, where I could work on my presentation in the evenings. I found a listing on a short-term rental site, a white cottage with a little porch, standing apart from other houses, about 15 minutes from the training venue. The owner emailed that the key would be in a combination lockbox by the front door. He apologized that he could not meet me in person because he lived out of state and rented the house remotely. I arrived around 6 on Sunday as a light rain started. The day was quiet. No cars passed as I parked beside the porch. The cottage looked exactly like in the photos: neat lawn, white shutters, 2 wicker chairs. I took the key from the lockbox, went in, and did a quick walk through. The interior was simple but fine. An open living room with a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. I hauled my suitcase and laptop inside, changed into sweatpants, and ordered delivery from a nearby Italian place. I set my laptop on the table, plugged in, and skimmed my slides, thinking about the questions my manager always asks. Nothing felt odd yet, just the normal first hour alone in a place that is not yours. About 40 minutes after I arrived, someone knocked. I figured it was my food early, so I opened the door without thinking. A woman around 50 stood on the steps in a raincoat, short gray hair tucked behind her ears. She smiled and said, "Hi, I am Janice, the property manager. I just stopped by to make sure the new guest is settled." Her smile was practiced. Not fake exactly, just used a lot. I stepped onto the porch so we would not drip on the floor, and she waited there holding a plastic folder inside a grocery bag to keep it dry. She glanced past me into the living room, then back at my face like she was checking a box. I told her everything was great and thanked her. She asked how long I would be staying and where I was from. 3 nights, Boston, work training, I said. She nodded and said if I needed anything, extra towels, toiletries, blankets, she lived about 10 minutes away and could drop things off. Then she asked if I wanted directions to the nearest grocery store and mentioned a pharmacy that actually stays open late out here. It was normal small talk, but I did catch myself thinking it was late and raining for a check-in. I said I was fine and that I should get back to work. She gave me a plain white card with her first name and a phone number. No logo. Before she left, she added, "Keep your car doors locked. Teenagers sometimes do dumb stuff out here." She said it like a casual tip, but I locked the door after she walked down to her car anyway. A few minutes later, a different knock came. faster, and lighter. That was my dinner. The delivery kid handed me a paper bag and ran back to his car like he hated the rain. I ate at the kitchen counter while I scrolled emails, then opened my slide deck and made a list of talking points. The house clicked and creaked the way old houses do, and I kept telling myself not to assign meaning to every sound. I double-checked the front door and the little side door in the kitchen because of Janice's line about teenagers. Her card sat by my laptop. Just Janice and a number. By 9 I was in work mode, laptop open, notes spread, TV on low with local news for background noise. I was not really watching, but the weather guy said the rain would last all night. When I got up to refill my water, I noticed the porch light was on. I did not remember turning it on. Maybe it was on a sensor. I was not going to hover at the window, so I went back to the table and kept typing. A few minutes later, the TV glitched for a second, just a tiny flicker, and then it was fine again. I muted it and listened for a minute. All I heard was rain on the porch roof. I added a bullet, deleted 2, and checked the agenda email. My phone was face down next to the keyboard. It buzzed once, then again. When I flipped it over, the screen said, "Unknown caller." I let it go to voicemail because spam always calls at night when you are trying to focus. Then it buzzed again almost immediately with the same thing. I looked at the door and toward the window and could not see the porch. The house felt too quiet in that way you notice on purpose. I set the phone and told myself to finish a slide. I had just started typing when my phone lit up and an unknown number called me. "Hi, this is Roger, the owner," the man said. "I just got a notification that the door code was used earlier, so I wanted to check you found the key and everything's okay." I felt stupidly relieved and said yes, the key worked and the place was great. Then I mentioned that his property manager, a woman named Janice, had already stopped by to check on me. The line went quiet. Not dead, just him breathing. He said, very slow, "I don't have a property manager." "I never send anyone." I stood up so fast my chair scraped. He asked, "What did she look like?" "What exactly did she say to you?" I told him. Around 50, short gray hair, raincoat, introduced herself as Janice, said she lived 10 minutes away, offered groceries and extra towels, told me to keep my car locked because of teenagers. He let out a breath and said, "You need to call the police right now. That's someone pretending to work for me. She's casing the place, or you. Hang up and dial 911. I said okay. He added, "Don't open the door to anyone." "Stay away from windows." I hung up, hands shaking, and dialed. The dispatcher answered fast. Name, location, nature of emergency. I gave the address from the listing. Said a woman had come by claiming to be a property manager, but the actual owner said he has no one. The dispatcher asked if she was there now. I said I didn't know. I told her I had a card with a first name and number, but no company. She told me to lock all doors if they weren't already, move to an interior room, stay on the line. I said the front door was locked, and so was the side door. She asked if I had seen a vehicle. I hadn't. She said officers were on the way. I stayed on with the dispatcher and heard it at the same time. A hard, flat rap on the living room window. Not the door. The window. I turned and there she was. That same woman, her face pressed to the glass. Not angry, not smiling. Just watching me like she was making sure I was me. I yelled without meaning to and backed into the wall. "She's here," I said into the phone. The dispatcher told me to move to a safe room and lock it. Stay quiet. Do not engage. I ran to the closer bedroom and shut the door, turned the thumb lock, and pushed the small dresser against it because my brain needed to do something. The woman jiggled the front handle, a slow pull and rattle. Then again, harder. The dispatcher kept me talking. "Where are you? Can you barricade more? Are there other exits? I told her I was in the bedroom, that I could hear the front door, that I didn't think she was inside. There was a scraping sound like she brushed against the porch rail, then nothing, then the handle again. I did not go check. The dispatcher gave me updates. Officers were close, minutes out. I heard one more knock at the window, farther away this time, lower, like she tried a different pane. Then silence. That was worse. I crouched by the bed, phone to my ear, trying to listen past my breathing. The dispatcher said the officers were pulling up. After that, there were sharp knocks and a man's voice yelling, "Police! If anyone's inside, call out." I called back from the bedroom, said my name. They told me to stay put until they cleared it. I listened to boots, a door opening, radios, the porch door, then the officer outside my bedroom. "It's clear. You can open up." I moved the dresser and opened the door. 2 officers were in the hall. They were polite but quick, asked for a description and walked the property with flashlights, while I stood with another officer in the kitchen. No footprints they could see, no car nearby, no one on the road. They took the card the woman gave me and said they'd check the number. One asked if there was anyone who knew I was staying alone. I said my co-workers knew I was in town, but not this address. He suggested I find a hotel for the night. I said yes. They waited while I grabbed my laptop and a few things, then followed me to my car. Before I left, they checked the lockbox and door again. The owner, Roger, came by the next morning while it was light, and he looked like he hadn't slept. He kept saying he was sorry, and that in 5 years of renting he'd never had anything like this. The police told me later they couldn't find her. No calls about a strange car. Nothing from neighbors. I stayed with my co-workers at the hotel, and I finished the training. But that's not really the point. What stuck with me was how normal she seemed, and how easily I opened the door. I don't rent remote places anymore. The lock on my room's door had been ripped out of the frame, even though I'd blocked it with a dresser just an hour earlier. Last summer in Oregon, I was driving back after client meetings, regional manager stuff, mileage reports piling up in my head, when around 9 at night, the highway went empty and my engine started coughing. Then it died. No bars on my phone, fields on both sides, not even a farmhouse light. The only building I could see was a rundown motel with a sun-bleached sign and 4 long buildings shaped like a U around a weeds-choked parking lot. Most windows were boarded. It looked dead, but it still beat sleeping in a dead car with semis ripping past at 2 in the morning. I tried a few doors, telling myself I'd pay someone in the morning if anyone even owned the place. The first 3 were locked solid. The 4th, in the far block, gave a little, and then opened. Inside smelled like dust and old carpet. Dry though, no mold. There was a cracked dresser, a busted TV, and a mattress with no sheets. I dragged the dresser to the door, wedging it across the knob, and kicked the deadbolt over out of habit. I knew it was dumb. Nobody was coming, but I still checked the bathroom and the closet. I left my bag near the back wall, grabbed my thermos of coffee from the trunk, and sat on the mattress with my back to the corner so I could see the whole room. I must have dozed in and out because when an engine rolled into the lot at midnight, I was awake before I knew why. Headlights swept through the cracks in the boards for a few seconds, cut out, and left a dull after-image. I sat there listening. 10 quiet minutes. My heartbeat slowed. Then I heard voices. 2 men, low and close, like they were keeping it down for someone, not like they cared if anyone heard. They moved along the outside walkway, shoes scraping grit, testing doors. A rattle, then another a few units down, then a thud. I slid off the mattress and put my weight into the dresser, feeling stupid for picking the furthest, most hidden room. One of the voices said, "Locked," and the other answered, "Keep checking." Their steps came closer, patient. My hands were already wet and the room felt smaller. They stopped right outside. The knob wiggled once, twice. A shoulder hit the door. The dresser nudged my thighs. I pushed back. A second slam, heavier, made the top corner of the door flex. The voice closest to me said, almost bored, "It'll go," and they both started driving it in rhythm. I braced my back and legs and tried to be smart about it. Push when they hit, breathe when they reset. But the dresser scraped an inch, then another. One of them laughed under his breath. Not loud, just confident. I looked around for something better than a dresser and found nothing worth a damn. The bathroom had a second door with a tiny window that looked into the inner courtyard. It was the only option that wasn't stand here and get flattened. I told myself I'd circle, get to the car, and be gone before they realized I'd switched sides. I grabbed my keys and the backpack with my laptop and receipts. The next hit to the main door popped the strike plate out of the jam, and the frame made a sharp, dry sound that I still hear when people slam doors in conference rooms. I moved into the bathroom, shut the door behind me, and latched it. Not that it would slow them, but noise buys seconds. I put my elbow through the little window. It hurt like hell, and glass stuck to my skin, but I cleared it fast with my sleeve, turned the latch, and shoved the frame outward. The crash when the main door finally gave up sounded like furniture breaking in a warehouse. I slid out feet first, dropped into the weeds, and stayed low. Someone shouted, "Window!" and another voice swore. I ran along the back of the building, following the strip of bare dirt under the eaves so I wouldn't crunch gravel, and cut around to the end. The lot opened up. Their pickup, a beater with a mismatched door, sat nose out, parked at an angle that blocked the main exit. My sedan was 10 yards off, crooked where I'd left it earlier when it died the first time. I heard one of them in the room behind me, the other landing outside with a thump and saying, "He's out." I didn't look back. I yanked the driver's door, dropped into the seat, and jammed the key in. For a second, all I got was a sick little cough and a dead dashboard. I pumped the pedal once, twice. The engine sneezed, then caught, rough and shaky. "Come on," I said out loud, like it was a coworker on a bad day. The headlights threw thin cones across the lot. In my mirror, a shape cleared the corner and stopped, surprised I'd made it to the car at all. He lifted a hand, maybe to shout, maybe to point. I didn't wait for the caption. I cranked the wheel hard and aimed not for the blocked exit, but for the shoulder where weeds had eaten the pavement. I could feel the sedan fighting the ruts under the tires as I bounced off the curb. The pickup filled the windshield for a second, then slid left as I kept my foot down. I steered out through the overgrown shoulder, going around their pickup. In the rear view, two figures broke from the shadow of the building and ran for their truck. I kept the wheel steady and didn't let up. The shoulder turned back into highway and the car smoothed out. My hands shook on the wheel, and I had to tell myself to breathe because I was overcorrecting on nothing. Their headlights showed up behind me 5, maybe 6 minutes later, hard to say, and hung there like they were judging my speed. I kept it just under what would get me pulled over. If they wanted a chase, I wasn't going to hand them one right into a ditch. They stayed a few miles, sometimes dropping back, sometimes edging closer. Every time a curve came up, I pictured them trying to box me, but the highway didn't give them much. Then their lights faded. Either they turned off or they just gave up. I didn't slow. The gas pedal felt welded to the floor and my calf cramped, but I didn't dare change anything. I listened to every noise the car made and waited for the engine to hiccup again, but it held. I didn't see an open place for a long time. No houses with porch lights, no late diners, just dark road and those brief green signs that never said what I wanted. About 40 minutes later, by the dash clock, I pulled into a convenience store that had the whole lot lit up like an operating room. 2 pumps, 1 car, a bored clerk inside at a lottery machine. I parked nose out right under a light and finally let my foot off the gas. The silence made my heart sound too loud. I didn't go inside. I didn't want to put walls around me again, and I didn't want to explain why my sleeve had dried blood from the glass. I locked the doors, adjusted the mirror so I could see all the approaches, and sat there. Every set of headlights coming off the highway made me tense, like I'd been caught doing something I couldn't defend. If a truck braked, I watched it the whole time it was in the lot. I told myself that if the pickup showed up, I'd lay on the horn and stay under the lights. A camera stared at me from the corner of the roof. I liked that camera. The sky went gray, and then it was morning. People started pulling in for coffee. I called the county on speaker so I could keep scanning the lot. I explained the highway mile marker, the dead motel, the 2 guys, the forced door. The woman on the line sounded tired but not surprised. She asked if I was safe now. I said yes, for the moment. She said the place was known: squatters, drugs, sometimes copper theft. "We don't get many calls that stick," she said. I asked if someone could check it out. She said they'd flagged the address, but patrols were thin and it wasn't an emergency if no one was hurt. I gave my name and number, felt stupid, then gave them anyway. She told me to avoid the area, document any damage, and call back if I saw the truck again. That was it. I got coffee, gas, and paper towels. The clerk asked if I was okay because my sleeve looked rough. I said I bumped a window in the dark and left it there. Before I pulled out, I checked my trunk to make sure nothing had been messed with. Everything was where I left it, like the night hadn't happened. I drove out in daylight and took the long way that kept me on main roads. No one followed. No one called me back. I never learned who those 2 were or what they planned to do if they got through that door. Maybe they thought drugs or cash were inside. Maybe they wanted my car. Or maybe it was worse and I don't chase that thought far. A week later I followed up, and the deputy said they didn't find anything. No truck, no prints, just a broken frame in a place everyone pretends isn't theirs. That was enough for me. I don't shelter in abandoned buildings anymore, even if it's the only roof around. I'll sleep in the car on the shoulder with the flashers and deal with the ticket. I think about what happens if I don't make it through that window, if my elbow hesitates or the latch sticks, and I get stuck between a flimsy bathroom door and 2 guys who aren't guessing, they're sure. The dresser had maybe a minute left. After that, there was no second exit. Back when I was 32, I traveled for work all the time. I came to a conference in a big port city on the East Coast. It was my first trip to that city, and I stayed at a hotel in the business district where the event was held. The conference ended late, around 11 at night, and I decided to walk to find a 24-hour store. I needed to buy a phone charger that I forgot at home. The concierge pointed me in the direction of the nearest supermarket but warned I should take a cab. I figured it wasn't that far and I could walk. Just 15 minutes according to the map. I left the hotel, turned right as instructed, and walked along the lit street past office buildings. I was still in my work clothes, badge on a lanyard, flats instead of heels because I'd learned that lesson on my first sales roadshow. The plan was simple: grab a charger, go back, send 2 emails, sleep. The doorman said, "Ma'am, please call a car," which I heard as "please don't be dumb." I told him I'd be quick. Traffic hummed. A couple from the conference waved getting into a ride share. I checked the map even though it looked like one straight line. 10 blocks, then a left. Easy. The first 10 minutes were normal. I passed closed shops and cafes, met occasional pedestrians heading home. Then the street started changing. Office buildings gave way to warehouses. Lighting got worse. There were no people at all. I realized I turned the wrong way. Checked the map on my phone and saw I entered an industrial zone. I needed to go back 2 blocks and turn the other direction. I turned around and walked faster, feeling uncomfortable from the deserted streets and poorly lit alleys. Between warehouse buildings were deep passages where strange sounds came from. Dogs barking and metal clanging. I quickened my pace, already regretting the decision to walk. Suddenly, a dark van without any markings stopped next to me. It rolled at my speed like it was pacing me. I kept my eyes forward and used a window as a mirror to watch it without obviously watching it. I didn't see a logo. No magnet, no plates I could read. It eased past, braked, then idled. I crossed to the opposite sidewalk without breaking stride, set on getting back to the brighter block. I considered calling the hotel, but that felt ridiculous while I was still on a public street. I put the phone in my jacket pocket so I could hit emergency without digging in my bag. The side door was open. I instinctively moved to the wall of the building and kept walking, not looking at the van. 2 men got out and silently walked behind me, staying about 10 feet away. I didn't turn around but heard their steps. They walked in sync, not speeding up or slowing down. My heart was pounding, but I tried to walk evenly without showing panic. To the turn where the lit street began was about 50 yards. I heard one of them say something to the other in Spanish but didn't make out the words. Their steps became more frequent. They started closing the distance. I scanned for options. To my right, a chain-link gate with a fat, rusted lock. Behind it, stacked pallets. To my left, a narrow alley, darker than the street, smelling like oil. No voices anywhere. I tightened my bag strap until it dug into my shoulder. If they grabbed it, I'd let it go. Phone in pocket, thumb ready. I rehearsed. Corner of... and tried to read the street sign ahead without slowing. I remembered a security briefing from another job. Pick a person and command them. Okay. If I reached people, I'd point and say, "You, call the police." One of them whistled, short and flat. The other didn't answer. That silence felt worse than a comment. It meant focus. I kept my pace steady and cut a slightly sharper angle toward the corner, enough to show intent without looking like a sprint. The glow from the main road bled over the rooftops, warmer than the cold blue light behind me. I pictured myself in a camera frame. I pictured a clerk with a buzzer and a counter. I didn't look back because I didn't need to. Their shoes on concrete told me they were closer. There was a cross street to the left, even darker. I ignored it. Straight to the light. I shifted my phone in my pocket so I could double-click for SOS without fumbling. The van's engine clicked off behind us, which somehow made it worse. I could hear them breathing now, calm, not winded. I told myself not to run unless I had to, because if I ran and they ran, I'd have nothing left before the corner. I felt my calf twitch anyway. I counted 5 more parking bays to the turn. 4. 3. My mouth was dry and I swallowed air. I saw a glowing gas station sign ahead at the corner of the block and almost ran toward it. The steps behind me quickened, but when I ran out onto the lit street where cars stood and the gas station was working, I looked back. The men were gone. They just disappeared, apparently returned to the van. I didn't waste time trying to spot it. I cut straight across the forecourt and pushed through the door. The chime sounded too loud. There were 2 customers at the soda fountain and a cashier behind thick glass. I went straight to the counter and said, "Can you call me a cab, please?" Right now, my voice came out thin and shaky. He looked at me, looked past me toward the street, and picked up the phone without asking for money. I kept my hands flat on the counter so he wouldn't see them tremble. While waiting, my hands were shaking and I couldn't calm down. I focused on stupid things. The scratch on the plexiglass, the smell of old coffee, the way the lottery tickets were lined up. I kept checking the door like they'd stroll in and pretend to buy gum. The cashier, an older man, looked at me carefully and asked where I was coming from. I pointed with my chin, because I didn't want to turn my back to the door, and said, "From down there, near the warehouses." I took a wrong turn. He shook his head right away, like he'd expected that answer and hated it. "Ma'am, you're lucky," he said. And he said it in a flat, serious way that made me feel it in my stomach. He asked if anyone followed me, and I said there were 2 men and a van, no plates. He sucked his teeth and told me not to go back that way. He said in that industrial zone people regularly disappear, especially at night. For the last 2 years, a group operated there kidnapping people, and police couldn't do anything about it. He wasn't being dramatic. He sounded tired, like he'd said it before, like he'd told other people who didn't listen. He nodded at the cameras on the ceiling and said, "Stand where the lens can see you." I moved 2 steps and stood under the brightest strip. I asked if he'd called the police on them before. He said yeah, a bunch of times. But by the time anyone came, the van was gone, the street was empty, and there was nothing to point at. "You were loud," he added, meaning my entrance, the chime. "That helps." He told me to keep my phone out and not unlock the door for anyone. The 2 customers kept glancing over like they wanted gossip, but also didn't want to get involved. The cab pulled up faster than I expected. I made the driver roll forward so I could get in right by the door, no extra steps. He asked where to. I gave the hotel name, and he nodded like he knew the one. As we pulled away, I twisted around to look. The cross street was empty again. No van, no men. Just that dead block sitting there like nothing had happened. I sat back and realized I was gripping the door handle so hard my fingers hurt. The driver didn't ask questions. He kept the radio low. That helped. Back at the hotel, I went straight to my room and locked everything. Deadbolt, latch, even wedged my suitcase under the handle because I didn't know what else to do with the adrenaline. I couldn't sleep all night, replaying in my head what could have happened. Every version was worse than the last. I tried to read emails to distract myself, and ended up staring at the screen with my inbox open and nothing going in. Around 4, I dozed for 20 minutes and jerked awake because a car horn outside sounded like that van door. Next day, I told a colleague from the local office about it, and she confirmed the cashier's words. That area was known as dangerous. There really were cases of disappearances, and locals never walked there at night. She said vans without plates were often spotted in that zone, and police suspected connection to human trafficking but had no evidence. She said it like a warning she wished she'd given me yesterday. I understood how close I came to becoming another missing person. Still don't understand why they backed off. Maybe they were scared of cameras at the gas station or just decided the risk was too high. Since then, on business trips, I never walk through unfamiliar areas at night. I always take cabs even if the distance seems short. That 15-minute walk almost cost me everything. Three years ago, I was shooting abandoned buildings for architectural firms and galleries. I got a job to photograph an old textile factory before demolition. The company wanted documentation of the industrial architecture for their archives. I decided to work on Saturday morning when no construction crew would be around. I drove there around 10 and parked at the main gate of the complex. The place was huge, several brick buildings connected by enclosed walkways. I grabbed my camera, tripod, and a headlamp even though daylight was coming through the broken windows. The first 2 hours went smoothly. I photographed production halls with rusting equipment, stairwells with peeling plaster, office spaces with scattered documents. In one building, I found an old cafeteria with long tables and faded posters still taped to the walls. I shot wide, then details. A clock frozen at some forgotten time. A switchboard with labels worn clean. I kept to a plan. Start at the east end and work west, so I wouldn't lose track and repeat rooms. Around noon, I checked in with the project manager by text, then went back to work. I noted which exits were clear in case I had to bail fast, habit from other sites. The weather was cold but bright, and the quiet helped. A few pigeons lifted when I opened a stairwell door and then settled again. A tag on one wall had a recent date, which told me people still came through, but I hadn't seen anyone. I stuck to the main corridors and avoided roofs. Too much risk for the job, and no one was paying extra for skyline shots. In late afternoon, I hit the oldest building and marked an emergency exit with a working push bar and a fire escape outside. I also clocked a blocked stairwell on the opposite side. Fallen beams, not usable. I made a mental map. In from the gate, right through offices, out via the fire escape if needed. I got absorbed in shooting details and didn't notice the sun starting to set. It was a short winter day and darkness came early. I decided to finish one last series in the basement where there were arches and shadow lines clients liked. Going down the concrete stairs, I heard footsteps somewhere above me. I figured it was echo from my own steps. I set the tripod, took a few frames, and checked the histogram. About 20 minutes in, I heard a distinct sound, like someone dragging something across the floor one level up. I paused, listened, and heard it again. Slow scrape, then nothing. I packed the camera, went back upstairs, and called out, thinking it was a security guard or a homeless guy sheltering. "Hello? I'm a photographer. I have permission." My voice carried in a way I didn't like. No answer came, but the footsteps resumed, now closer. I stood at the top of the basement stairs and waited. "I'm heading out," I said, to make it clear I wasn't there to start anything. In the far end of the corridor, a silhouette stepped out and stopped. A person stood motionless, turned toward me. I raised my camera and used the built-in flash to see better. The strobe washed the wall, and for a second I saw him clearly. A man around 30 in a dirty work jacket with long, tangled hair. He didn't say anything, just stared at me, and there was something wrong in how still he was. No shifting, no glance at my gear, just steady eyes. "I'm leaving," I said. "I have permission to be here, but I'm heading out." I took 2 slow steps back toward the stairwell, keeping him in frame in case I needed another burst of light. Then he started walking toward me, and I saw he held a knife with a long blade. It wasn't a box cutter or a tool. It looked like a kitchen knife. Every instinct said put distance between us. I turned and moved for the stair to the first floor, but when I reached it, beams had fallen across the steps and wedged into the rail. I had noted it earlier and planned to use the other exit if I needed out. So I pivoted and ran the opposite direction toward the emergency door I'd marked. He didn't shout or run. His boots hit the concrete in a calm rhythm that made my skin crawl. I cut through a drafting room, over file boxes, and into the side hall. The metal door with the push bar was ahead. I hit it hard. It stuck for a second and then gave. Cold air and damp air mixed in the doorway. Outside, a steel fire escape dropped along the wall. I grabbed the rail, swung out, and started down. I took 2, 3 steps at a time, one hand on the rail to keep from slipping. Metal clanged above as a door banged open. I looked up and saw him step onto the landing. I went faster, almost a jump between flights. "Hey!" I yelled to no one, just noise, hoping maybe a neighbor or passing car existed out there. My foot hit the last treads wrong and I slid the last 2 steps, catching the rail with my elbow. I hit the pavement, kept my feet, and cut left along the building toward the fence gap I'd used. I risked a glance up. He leaned over the rail, tracking me without a word. I ran for the break in the fence where I'd parked. My keys were already in my hand, fob between fingers the way a runner holds them. Behind me, the thuds on the stairs got faster. No more measured pace, metal ringing with each landing. I cleared a stack of pallets, squeezed past a dumpster, and felt the fence line under my palm as I turned the corner. Boots hammered the metal above, then hit the ground behind me. He was chasing me. I burst outside across the overgrown yard to the main gate where I'd left my car, not looking back because that would slow the decision. I hit the fob, slid in, locked the doors, and gripped the wheel until my breathing steadied enough to keep the key from slipping out. I watched the doorway in my rear view and the empty gate beyond it, deciding he either stayed inside or didn't want to risk light outside. I pulled onto the road, careful but fast, checking mirrors like he could suddenly appear behind me carrying that long knife in a colder intent. I didn't call immediately because my voice shook, and I knew I'd sound unreliable, like a trespasser making excuses instead of a contractor reporting danger. I parked behind a strip mall, waited out the adrenaline, then dialed after an hour and told the dispatcher I'd been chased with a knife. She asked about injuries. I said no, shaken, and she sent officers, then later called back to say doors were secured and nobody was there. Next morning, a detective asked me to come to the station to look at something and verify exactly which building and corridors I'd worked in. I went because I wanted everything documented so the client and city wouldn't accuse me of trespassing or exaggerating to cover a missed deliverable later. In a small interview room, he opened a folder and said, "We cleared the complex and found improvised living quarters in the basement you photographed." He slid photos across: a stained mattress on pallets, canned food stacked neatly, candles puddled to stubs, and a wall covered in a blood diagram. Swirls and symbols filled the surface from floor to ceiling. I asked if it was animal blood, and he said the lab hadn't confirmed yet. From another angle, I recognized the basement where I'd shot arches, maybe 20 yards from my tripod, and my stomach dropped in a quiet way. He had me circle rooms on a printed map, and I marked the blocked stair, the fire escape door, and corridor where I'd seen him. By afternoon, he called with updates and asked me to return. Forensic tech had confirmed human blood, fresh, not smears from pipes or vandalism there. They also found a knife stuck upright in a wooden table, and a blood-soaked rag folded beside it like a tool waiting to be used. He said the man likely injured himself while making the drawings, which happens. People in crisis occupy abandoned buildings and live unnoticed for months sometimes. "We didn't locate him," he said. "Maybe he bailed when you ran. Maybe he uses service corridors between buildings. Both options make sense here today." He warned situations like this turn violent fast if they think their space is threatened and said, "You're lucky he didn't corner you downstairs alone." I asked about patrols, and he said they'd request extras until demolition, but resources are thin, so I should adjust my practices before close call. He photographed the bruise on my elbow from the fire escape rail, took my statement, copied permission letter, and asked for frame that showed people. I gave him everything, including flash shots where a faint outline might exist, and he said they'd call if they pulled a face or tattoo. I changed how I work. No more solo derelict jobs, radios with a partner, rules about exits, and stop if there's trash, food, or tags. I carry a first aid kit, a tourniquet, and a can of spray. It slows me down, but it beats the other outcome. I backed up the files and checked timestamps. The basement frames landed minutes before the chase, and one corner blur might be hair or glare. I sent it anyway and heard nothing further. No match, no follow-up, just a report number and the demolition date shifting again. My partner reviewed everything and said, "You were lucky." I said I knew, and he tapped the blocked stair in a wide frame and said, "That saved you." At night, I replay his silence and consider staying longer, or fumbling that door, and accept luck beat planning, so empty building gets treated occupied. Detective Rachel Connor from the Sacramento Police Department spent years reviewing cold cases involving minors. She liked the order of it. Boxes, reports, one screen per subject, because it kept the noise in her head down. But this one case always made her stop. 2004, apartment off a busy street, single mom, 9-year-old boy named Tyler, who kept insisting someone was in his room at night, behind the bookshelf by the window. The mom was working doubles and coming home at midnight, so at first she told him it was nightmares and sent him back to sleep. It wasn't neglect, it was triage. Still, the notes showed almost a month of the same complaint. Tyler refused to sleep in his room one Saturday morning and had a breakdown. The mother's statement said she lost her patience. She took him by the hand, walked him to the room, and said, "I'll show you there's nobody there." She went to the shelf and started pulling it away from the wall. The shelf jerked back. Someone was holding it from the other side. Rachel reread the original patrol narrative twice. She pictured the small room, the cheap shelf, the push-pull that turned a bad dream into a crime. The timeline said the mother screamed and shoved the kid into the hallway. It tracked. People imagine they'll be brave. Mostly they get the kid out first. 6 minutes later, officers were on scene. The report had one of those plain lines that made Rachel angry in a quiet way. No injuries. Like that made it fine. Back in 2004, the responding officers found the man wedged behind the shelf in the narrow space between furniture and wall. A 40-year-old named Leon Sparks, homeless, meth in his system. He'd been slipping in through the unlocked bathroom window while the mom worked nights. He watched the boy sleep from behind the shelf. In his pockets, they found photographs of Tyler sleeping, cheap film camera prints with a timestamp strip. The lab called them low resolution but clear. The DA got a legal entry, stalking a minor drug possession. He took a plea and got 8 years. Rachel checked the prison summary. Sparks served, released 2012. Then the paper trail thinned out like it always did when people stepped off the map. In 2024, Rachel was doing a sweep. Verify current status for offenders tied to child-involved cold cases. Not glamorous, just necessary. She'd call parole offices, pull supervision logs, cross-check shelters, and hospital admits. Sparks popped up as released 2012, then completed supervision 2014. She didn't like how fast that read on a screen compared to what it meant. She told herself it wasn't personal. It still felt personal. He was under supervision for 2 years, then his trail went cold. The last known address was a shelter in Fresno. He left in 2014 and never registered elsewhere. That wasn't illegal by itself. His case didn't carry lifetime registry, but it made Rachel's skin itch. She started with the basics. DMV returns, Medi-Cal hits, county jail books. Nothing. She tried to find Tyler to warn him, even if it was just a courtesy call. The family had bounced through 3 addresses after 2004, 2 in the same school district, then a private mailbox, and then they moved out of state. The forwarding ended. No current phone. The old landlord said, "Nice lady. Quiet." Paid on time, Rachel told a colleague about it over coffee and records. He listened without interrupting. He was the type who didn't think everything was a pattern, but he still checked. "Want me to run unsolveds? Kids say, someone in the house at night type?" he asked. She said yes. He pulled a filtered dump for California, last 5 years, terms like night intruder, child report unverified, suspicious attic, and closet hiding. He wheeled his chair over and they went down the list. 3 reports stood out. Different counties, different families. Same opening line. A kid reports someone inside at night. Adults chalk it up to nightmares. Police do a quick check, find nothing. In one case, the family later discovered an open vent in a hallway ceiling and small footprints in dust in the attic. The responding officers did a crawl, found nobody. Rachel read that one twice. The dust photo was attached to the report, a gray square with patternless impressions. She forwarded it to herself anyway. She didn't get dramatic about it. She flagged the 3 cases in her working set with a shared tag and wrote a short note for the unit. Historic offender with a specific behavior profile, prior access via unsecured entry points, late-night proximity to sleeping children, photography pattern. She added the Fresno shelter link and his old booking photo. The photo was one of those images that make people argue about pity versus anger. Rachel just saw logistics, jawline, height estimate, posture that said stimulant abuse. Then she tried to push the search on Sparks. She checked 2 death indices, nothing. She ran his name against County Coroner John Doe's. No close matches. She tried a clinic intake under an alias he'd used once, Len Park, hoping for sloppiness. 0. She requested the Fresno shelter's old paper logs from storage because sometimes someone wrote a phone number in a margin. When the PDF came back, the pages were scanned, skewed, handwritten columns zigzagging. She leaned in until her eyes hurt, found a phone number next to Leon S. It was dead. Rachel didn't call the press and didn't announce a theory. She sent quiet emails, patrol briefings in 2 districts about securing attic access, checking vents, not dismissing children's reports without a secondary search. "Take 10 more minutes," she wrote. "Just 10. She knew how 10 minutes sounded in a busy night. She still wrote it. She thought about the mother in 2004 saying, "I'll show you there's nobody there," and how fast that turned into a scream in a hallway. She thought about kids being told to go back to bed. She pictured a narrow space behind a shelf and a man holding it in place while a child slept 3 feet away. Then she kept going through databases and old numbers, because that was the job, and continued searching for Leon Sparks, but the trail was dead. Rachel contacted homeless shelters across California with a short description and the old booking photo attached. She kept it simple. Male, 40s in 2014, thin, stimulant history, might avoid strict sign-in rules. Managers called back or emailed within a day or 2. Most didn't recognize the name. A few said maybe, then walked it back when she asked for dates. One forwarded grainy stills of a different man. Nothing useful. She noted dates and contacts for follow-up, in case something later connected to this particular search. She pulled arrest records for trespass, prowling, burglary tools, child stalking. The results were noise, X's at windows, custody messes, drunk neighbors climbing into the wrong unit. None of it matched a careful entry through a small opening and a habit of watching a child sleep. She wouldn't bend facts to fit him. Next was the family. Social media search. The mother's old first name paired with a new last name and a small porch photo. Rachel sent a message from her work account and asked for a call. The reply came that night with a number. When Rachel called, the woman sounded cautious but steady. "Is there a new reason to worry?" the mother asked after Rachel introduced herself. "I'm updating records on released offenders tied to old cases," Rachel said. "I don't have a specific threat. I wanted to verify current information." There was a pause with household noise in the background. The mother said Tyler was 29 now, married with kids, living in Oregon. She said he didn't like talking about it, even after all these years. He still checks closets, she added. Storage spaces, attic doors, hotels, rentals. He does it fast so he thinks I don't see. Rachel kept her voice even. Understood. Would he be willing to speak by phone? I can keep it brief. Another pause. He's trying to move on, the mother said. He prefers not to revisit it. I understand, Rachel said. She thanked her, verified an email, and ended the call. She wrote a concise contact note in the file. Rachel added an official note to the case and went back to her stack, but Sparks stayed in her head. She set search alerts across databases for his name and known aliases. Work piled up, runaways who weren't, custody exchanges that went sideways, a neighbor dispute that turned into arson. 6 months passed. Then an alert hit. A report from Portland. A family believed someone had been entering their house through a crawl space under the porch. They noticed after their 7-year-old daughter kept saying she heard scratching under her bedroom floor at night. The report listed pry marks on a vent screen and disturbed insulation near a short access door. No suspect identified. Portland sat about 3 hours from where Tyler now lived. Close enough to call. Rachel phoned Portland PD and reached a detective on property crimes. She gave Sparks' background in short lines, sent the old photo and the Fresno shelter note, and asked if they'd found any camera or bedding signs. We don't have him tied here, the detective said. Without something placing him in the area, there's not much we can do beyond note your info. I get it, Rachel said. If something turns, can you ping me? Sure. She emailed a brief summary for their file and added the Portland report to her flagged set. The file stayed open. Work kept going. New reports came in, and every time a child said there was someone in the house at night, Rachel thought about Leon Sparks and wondered where he was now. I was working at this big sporting goods store for about 8 months after finishing college, selling sneakers and athletic wear while looking for something more serious. I was 23, wore the standard red polo with a Tyler, sales associate name tag, and spent my shifts helping customers find sizes and ringing up purchases. Around mid-October, this woman in her mid-30s came up to me asking for help picking running shoes for her friend, asked normal questions about sizes and models, thanked me, and left without buying anything. I forgot about her until the next week when she came back, walked straight up to me again, bought 2 pairs of sneakers, and said during checkout that she appreciated my professionalism and that I'd really helped with her choice. I smiled and thanked her like we're trained to, but 3 days later she was back for a gym bag and again waited specifically for me, even though other associates were open. After her 4th visit in a week, my coworker Eric joked that I had a regular, and I started seeing the pattern. She came almost every other day, always bought something small, always found me. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. She remembered my name, which is normal, but also my usual aisle after lunch and when I took breaks. She'd stand just a bit too close at the register, not enough to call out, enough that I edged back without meaning to. When I offered to check another store for a size, she said, "No, I like when you help me." I told myself she was friendly or lonely. We get regulars. Some people make the store their routine. A week later, I got an Instagram follow request from an account called Rachel Cares. Blurry beach avatar, no bio. I accepted, then realized it was her. She started liking my old photos going back 2 years. Little heart notifications stacking every minute. I felt mild discomfort but told myself she might like my shoe posts. The next day she DM'd, "Hi Tyler. Thanks for the help at the store. You're always so attentive. Maybe coffee sometime?" I replied that I appreciated it but didn't meet customers outside work, company policy, and hoped she understood. She wrote back immediately. Of course. Just wanted to get to know you better. You seem interesting. I left it there, but the messages kept coming. Daily updates about weather, her errands, a show she watched, and each one ended with a question about my life. When I didn't answer, she'd follow with, "Everything okay? Are you busy?" Or, "Hope I'm not bothering you." It stopped feeling like casual chat, and more like she was checking whether I'd read her, whether I was ignoring her. Eric noticed me turning my phone face down and asked if it was the customer. I said no, but I also started logging her visits in my notes app, just dates and short details in case I needed to explain something later. That sounded paranoid even to me, but I did it anyway. One night I typed, "She asked if I live alone," then deleted it because maybe I had misheard. Next time she asked if I liked early mornings or late nights. By the next week, she showed up right at the end of my shift and waited until I finished with my last customer. "I can give you a ride home, heading that way anyway," she said, smiling like it was a favor. "I've got my car, but thanks," I said. She looked disappointed and a little confused. She didn't push it. That night I blocked her on Instagram. It felt like a line had been crossed. The next morning I had a new follow request from R_for_Rachel. Same avatar, no posts. I blocked that one too. 2 days later she came to the store with a gift. A box of expensive protein bars and a note. "For the best associate. Thanks for everything." I told her I couldn't accept personal gifts from customers and asked my manager, Andrea, to speak with her. Andrea pulled her aside, explained it was inappropriate and that she needed to stop contacting me personally. Rachel started crying, saying she was just trying to be friendly and didn't understand what she did wrong. She left after Andrea repeated the boundary and said future concerns would involve store security. I felt like the bad guy, even though I knew we'd handled it right. 3 days later, as I was clocking out, I saw her in the parking lot, sitting in her car with the engine running, not heading toward the store, just parked facing the doors. I turned around immediately and went back inside, told the security guard Luis that I didn't feel comfortable walking out alone. He nodded and said he'd walk me out to my car. We stepped out together. Same steady pace we always use when we're trying not to turn a thing into a bigger thing. Rachel drove away as soon as she saw him. Andrea didn't argue when I reported it. She listened, asked for times and dates, and then told me she'd handle it. She banned Rachel from the store on the spot and said she'd call the police if Rachel tried coming back. The next 2 weeks were quiet. I started to think it was over until a package showed up at work with my name on it. No return address, just the store's location and a small note inside. "Hope you like it." R. It was a t-shirt in my exact size with my basketball team's logo. I gave it to Andrea and told her I didn't want it. 3 days later, another package arrived, heavier. Inside was a winter jacket, exactly the style and brand I'd posted in an old Instagram photo months ago, plus the same R note. I took both packages to the police, along with printed screenshots of the messages, the dates I'd logged from the parking lot, and Andrea's written statement that the woman had been warned. The officer was polite but blunt. No threats, no physical contact. He said to document everything, not open any new packages, and call if she appeared. My parents wanted me out of there. After a call with the district manager, I got transferred to another store in a different town about 30 miles away. I scrubbed my Instagram, deleted the account, made a new one with a different name set to private, and I stopped posting anything that could hint where I worked or what my schedule was. The first 3 months at the new store were normal. No strange customers, no packages, nothing parked out front waiting. I started to relax. I met Kayla through a mutual friend and we went slow. Coffee first, then dinner. I didn't tell her everything, just the short version. Weird customer. Had to switch stores. Lesson learned. In early February, my mom called sounding tight. "A box came here for you," she said. "No return address." My parents didn't open it. They wrote "return to sender" and brought it to the post office. I called the police and updated the report. The detective said it would be hard to trace without a sender, and asked if I wanted to consider a restraining order if Rachel surfaced again. I said yes. If she showed up, I'd file immediately. After that, my parents installed cameras facing the street and the porch. I started scanning mirrors when I left work, taking a different route home twice a week. I told Kayla I had some family stuff going on and might be jumpy. She didn't press. No more packages came. Rachel didn't show. Still, I stopped wearing any tag with my last name. At the new place, my badge only reads Tyler Sales Associate. When a female customer waits for me instead of the closest associate, I pull Andrea's old playbook in my head and keep everything brief and neutral. Here are the sizes. Here's the return policy. Thanks for coming in. My phone stays in my pocket on vibrate. Notes app one tap away, just in case I need to record times. The part I can't shake is how she got my parents' address. I never posted it. Never put it on my profiles. Maybe she scraped it off some old public records site. Or maybe she asked a question I answered without thinking. Something dumb like, "Which neighborhood did you grow up in?" That let her connect the dots. I don't know. That not knowing keeps me careful. I double-check friend requests. I keep my social media boring and private. When someone calls me by my first name at the register, I feel my stomach tighten a little until I figure out if it's just because of the name tag. I miss the feeling of not thinking about these things, but I also know it only took one person deciding I was more than a cashier who helped her pick shoes. So I watch for small patterns now, the extra visit, the too familiar message, the heading that direction anyway. And I don't ignore my first reason to step back.